The streets are quiet, but inside the silence of a man's chest, a storm rages. He walks through life carrying invisible chains, not forged by enemies or circumstance, but by the invisible hands of expectation, history, and the unspoken rules of a world that has forgotten what it means to truly feel. Modern men are taught to armor themselves against vulnerability, to suppress the whisper of emotion in favor of efficiency, power, and the illusion of control. And so they wander through the corridors of existence, restless, searching, and strangely hollow, as if the very essence of their soul has been quietly drained while the world watched, indifferent. This emptiness is not born from weakness. It is the echo of a civilization that has demanded strength without softness, conquest without reflection, presence without depth. Nietzsche warned of the death of God, and yet he could not have foreseen that in the vacuum left behind, men would be abandoned not only to the chaos of the external world, but to the exile of their own hearts. The modern man is both warrior and ghost, a silhouette of ambition framed by the shadow of unexpressed feeling. To understand this emptiness, one must first understand the invisible architecture of the human psyche. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, of the unconscious depths that contain not only the fears and failings of a man, but also the raw, unclaimed power that defines him. Modern men live in the tyranny of their shadow without knowing it. They are taught to cultivate identity in the marketplace, to chase status, success, and fleeting validation, while the deeper truths of their being lie unattended, like a garden overrun by weeds. And weeds, left unchecked, will choke life itself. Syphoria, the dissonance between who a man is and who he believes he must be, hums quietly in every unspoken thought. It grows in the silence between the demands of the world and the desires of the soul. Every scroll of social media, every fleeting interaction, every hollow compliment from a stranger acts as a tiny anesthetic, numbing him to the disquiet, prolonging the illusion that he is whole, when in reality he is fragmenting. And yet within this disquiet lies a pathway to awakening. To step into clarity is to admit you have been starving not for success, not for power, not for recognition, but for authenticity. The first step toward reclaiming emotional fullness is to confront the fear that has long been whispered in the marrow, that to feel deeply is not weakness, that to surrender to the waves of the heart is not collapse, but a resurrection. A man must rebuild himself from the inside outward. It begins with mindset, not as a platitude, but as a battlefield of the soul. Every thought unexamined is a brick laid in the walls that confine him. Every belief untested is a chain that tightens around the chest. A disciplined examination of self, a rigorous confrontation with the illusions one has inherited from culture, family, and history, becomes the forge upon which the modern man can temper strength with depth. Belief in this context is not mere ideology. It is the intentional alignment of values with action. Modern men have been taught to believe in money, in fleeting admiration, in competition, but belief in the self, in one's emotional integrity, and the sacredness of one's inner world has been eclipsed. Reclaiming belief in the self requires courage. It requires looking into the mirror of one's own inadequacies and whispering to the reflection, you are enough, not because the world says so, but because you exist. Clarity follows belief, like dawn follows night. To see oneself without distortion is an act of rebellion. Most men move through life in a fog of expectation and pretense, performing roles dictated by society, provider, protector, competitor. But who is the man behind these masks? What desires, what fears, what love and grief lie buried under the steel and smoke of his external life? Clarity is not comfort, it is confrontation. It is the refusal to settle for half existence, for the mimicry of living, for the deadened hum of social approval. From clarity emerges vision, the compass that guides action. The modern man, untethered from the superficial rewards of status and performance, begins to envision a life sculpted by intentionality rather than obligation. Vision is the architecture of purpose. It is the knowledge that one's life, however chaotic, however fractured, can be shaped into coherence by conscious choice. Without vision, even the most successful man is a ghost walking a corridor of hollow victories. Purpose does not arrive in grand proclamations. It whispers. It waits in the quiet, unglamorous moments of discipline, of consistency, of attention given to the inner world. Discipline is the bridge between desire and manifestation. Action, guided by purpose, begins with the smallest steps: a conversation held honestly, a feeling allowed, a fear confronted. It is in these incremental acts of bravery that emotional depth is cultivated. Gratitude enters not as sentimentality, but as recognition. The man who has been emotionally starved learns to acknowledge the hidden riches of his life, the relationships that sustain him, the opportunities that challenge him, the very breath that moves through his lungs. Gratitude is the antidote to the hollow pursuit of validation. It roots him in reality, reconnects him to humanity, and nourishes the soil in which emotional fullness grows. Adaptability becomes the armor of the awakened man. The world will continue its relentless progression, the tides of technology, culture, and expectation rising like a storm. Emotional resilience is not passive endurance. It is the art of bending without breaking, of flowing without losing form, of encountering the inevitable pressures of life with the presence of mind and the integrity of heart. Learning is the final crucible. A man who seeks emotional completeness must become a student of himself and of life. He must read the works of those who dared to understand the human condition: Nietzsche, who explored the abyss of existence; Machiavelli, who dissected the dance of power; Huxley, who warned of spiritual emptiness in the age of machinery. Every book, every encounter, every wound becomes a teacher if he is willing to study with honesty. And in this journey, he discovers a truth older than time, that emotional emptiness is not a verdict, but a call. It is a summons to reclaim what has been surrendered to fear, to societal expectation, to distraction, to denial. The modern man is not a victim of his era. He is a candidate for transcendence. He is capable of walking through fire and emerging not only intact, but luminous, not only strong, but deeply, irreversibly alive. The conclusion of this awakening is not dramatic. It does not roar with the applause of the world. It whispers quietly in the chamber of the heart. I am here. I feel. I am whole. I am awake. And from this awakening, everything changes. The storm within settles, not because it has disappeared, but because it has been understood, harnessed, and transformed. The emptiness that once defined him becomes a space of possibility, a canvas for the profound beauty of living fully. He moves forward no longer haunted by the ghost of what he cannot feel, but empowered by the reality of what he can. Courage, love, authenticity, connection, and the endless horizon of his own awakened soul. The modern man, once empty, now knows himself. He carries the weight of his own consciousness like a weapon and a blessing. He speaks with the authority of someone who has faced the void and returned, stronger, wiser, and unbroken. And in that moment, he is free. He is alive. He is whole. He is awake. The freedom he now carries is not a freedom granted by society, by wealth, by accolades, or by validation. It is a freedom earned in the silence of introspection, in the dark corridors of his own psyche where fear once reigned, in the quiet confrontations with loneliness, despair, and doubt. There is a raw beauty in this reclamation, an elegance that cannot be purchased, an authority that cannot be inherited. He is the master of his inner empire because he dared to venture into it. Every relationship he forms from this point forward carries a depth unknown to the man who has never touched the marrow of his own emotional truth. He no longer seeks fulfillment in others because he understands that fulfillment begins within. And yet, this inner completeness radiates outward. He becomes magnetic not because of charm or calculated strategy, but because of presence, the quiet, unshakable certainty of a man who has faced himself without compromise. Women, men, the world, they are drawn not to his image, but to his essence. The elusive attraction is no longer a game of power, but a natural byproduct of authenticity. Desire, longing, attachment, all are now understood through the lens of consciousness. He sees them not as chains to bind him, but as forces to be navigated, experienced, and transcended. He comprehends the delicate alchemy of human connection, the subtle interplay of attraction, respect, and freedom. And in this comprehension, he gains mastery, not mastery over others, but mastery over the self, the ultimate command of life itself. Emotional resilience becomes second nature. The storms of modern life, the betrayals, the disillusionments, the moments when the world seems determined to test his limits, no longer break him. He moves through adversity with grace and intentionality, not because life has spared him suffering, but because he has learned to dance with it. Pain becomes a sculptor, shaping him into a vessel capable of holding greater depth, greater love, greater presence. And in the quiet of the night, when the world sleeps and the noise of obligation fades, he sits with himself without fear. He is not hollow. He is full. Full of memory, full of hope, full of courage. He has reconciled with the shadow he once denied, embraced the desires he once repressed, and forgiven the failures he once carried as shame. In this reconciliation lies peace, the rare and precious peace of a man who knows himself completely. This awakening is contagious, though subtle. Those who meet him feel it. They feel the energy of someone who has navigated the dark waters of emptiness and emerged whole. Not perfect, not untouchable, but profoundly human and infinitely alive. His presence challenges complacency, inspires reflection, and awakens something dormant in those around him. By knowing his own soul, he illuminates the path for others to find their own. In the end, the modern man who felt empty now understands that the void he once feared was never a prison. It was an invitation to confront, to claim, to transform, to step beyond the superficial trappings of existence and into the raw, unsanitized, breathtaking experience of being fully alive. And as he steps forward, the world unfolds differently. The streets are no longer empty, but vibrant. The conversations no longer shallow, but meaningful. The moments of solitude no longer lonely, but rich with reflection and insight. The future, once intimidating and uncertain, now stretches wide with possibility, because he carries within himself the most enduring source of strength, the knowing of his own depth, the mastery of his own heart, and the courage to feel every facet of life without compromise. The emptiness is gone, replaced by the fullness of conscious living. And this, finally, is the liberation he sought all along, to live as the totality of himself, unafraid, unbound, awake, and alive. He has returned from the void, not as a fragment, but as the whole, more human, more alive, more infinite than he ever imagined possible. And in this fullness, he learns the final, often overlooked truth, that the world has no obligation to nourish him, to recognize him, or to validate his existence. This revelation, though stark, is liberating. For it is only when he releases the expectation that life should bend to his desires that he truly begins to wield power. Not the kind of power that dominates, controls, or manipulates, but the quiet, unshakable power that arises from sovereignty over self. The modern man who was once empty discovers that freedom is not a destination. It is the natural consequence of integrity, courage, and relentless self-examination. Every thought he allows, every emotion he feels, Every action he takes is no longer a reaction to external chaos, but a deliberate orchestration of his inner world. He is not a victim of circumstance. He is the conductor of experience, the architect of reality. Nietzsche whispered that he who has a why can endure any how, and he understands this not as a maxim, but as a living, breathing truth. In relationships, he no longer confuses love with dependency, attraction with insecurity, or attention with validation. He sees through the illusions that ensnare the unawakened, the charms, the seductions, the social contracts designed to distract and bind. Women and men alike are drawn to him not because he seeks them, but because he moves in the world unchained. The elusive magnetism that others chase is his by default, for it is not manufactured, it is earned through authenticity, presence, and the fearless pursuit of truth. Discipline becomes his ally. The modern world, with all its noise, temptation, and seduction, no longer dictates the rhythm of his life. He sets his own cadence, governed by clarity, purpose, and the quiet understanding that mastery of self precedes mastery of circumstance. Every decision is informed by vision, every action aligned with principle, and every setback understood as a teacher rather than a punishment. He embraces struggle as a necessary forge for greatness, for it is only in resistance that strength is tempered, and only in fire that the steel of character is forged. Gratitude, once overlooked as a passive sentiment, becomes a cornerstone of his consciousness. He recognizes the fragility of life and the fleeting nature of experience, and in this recognition, he finds joy in the small, often imperceptible moments, the crackling of a fire, the hum of a city at dawn, the laughter of those who have earned his trust. Every encounter is a lesson, every interaction a mirror reflecting both shadow and light. The mundane becomes sacred because he has learned to see with the eyes of presence rather than habit. Resilience is no longer a skill he hopes to acquire. It is an identity he embodies. Pain, rejection, failure, and betrayal are no longer sources of fear, but catalysts for growth. He understands the paradox that to feel deeply is to be vulnerable, but to embrace vulnerability is to access a power that the hardened and indifferent cannot touch. In the dance of existence, he moves with awareness, letting neither fear nor comfort dictate his steps. And when he confronts the modern illusions of power, status, and superficial achievement, he sees them stripped of their glamour, the applause of the crowd, the recognition of peers, the fleeting admiration of strangers, all pale in comparison to the quiet satisfaction of a life lived aligned with truth. He realizes that the emptiness he once felt was not born of external deprivation, but of internal disconnection. And now, in reconnecting with himself, he has found a richness the world cannot take away. He becomes a living paradox, simultaneously fierce and gentle, introspective yet boldly present, detached yet deeply engaged. The world around him shifts because he moves through it as a singular force, unbent by expectation, unchained by fear, and undistracted by the illusions that capture the minds of the unawakened. In the final reckoning, he understands that life has never been about accumulation, conquest, or the pursuit of ephemeral pleasures. Life is about presence, mastery of self, and the courage to inhabit every moment fully. The modern man who once felt empty now walks with the certainty of one who has touched the void and returned, not hollow, but overflowing with insight, strength, and the kind of quiet authority that changes not only his destiny, but the destiny of those who cross his path. And as he stands in the light of his own awakening, he smiles not for victory over others, but for triumph over himself. For he knows that in the mastery of the inner world lies the ultimate freedom to live, to feel, to act, and to love without compromise, without fear, and without the lingering shadow of emptiness ever again. He is whole, he is free, he is alive. The modern man's journey does not end here. It never ends, for life itself is the crucible and consciousness is the path. But he now moves through it with the understanding that emptiness was never a curse. It was an invitation to reclaim what had always been his, the infinite, unassailable power of his own being. And in that reclamation, he discovers the most profound truth of all. The world will never complete him, validate him, or define him. Only he can. And having learned this, he walks forward, no longer empty, no longer searching, but fully, gloriously alive. He has returned from the abyss, not as a man broken by life, but as a man forged by it, tempered by it, and made infinite through it. And with this understanding, the modern man realizes that emotional emptiness was never a flaw. It was a signal, a call to awaken. It whispered that the external world, with all its noise, its judgments, and its fleeting pleasures, could never satiate the depth within him. The emptiness was a mirror, reflecting the neglected territories of his soul, the uncharted recesses where courage, honesty, and presence had been deferred for comfort, conformity, and distraction. He learns that to fill this emptiness, he must not seek outward. He must journey inward. The psyche, Jung once revealed, is a labyrinth rich with shadows, desires, and unacknowledged truths. To navigate it is to confront himself fully. The anger that simmers beneath civility, the fear that lurks behind bravado, the loneliness that masquerades as strength. And in facing these, he discovers that true power lies not in repression or avoidance, but in integration. Every shadow embraced is a piece of himself reclaimed. Every fear acknowledged is a step toward liberation. In this space, he cultivates emotional literacy, not the shallow performance of stoicism, but the deep, unflinching understanding of his own feelings. He feels the surge of anger, the ache of disappointment, the sting of loss, without judgment, without shame. He lets the waves wash over him, knowing that emotion is energy, and energy, when harnessed, is fuel for action, clarity, and vision. He learns that emptiness is not a void to fill with distractions or approval. It is a canvas waiting for the brushstrokes of self-mastery and intentional living. Purpose becomes the cornerstone of his existence. He realizes that without it, all achievement, all wealth, all admiration are hollow. Purpose is not what society prescribes: an office, a title, a relationship, but the personal, uncompromising drive to actualize the unique potential that resides within him. He aligns daily actions with this purpose, letting it guide his decisions, filter his relationships, and define his legacy. In purpose, he finds a gravitational center, and the chaos of modern life no longer sways him. Discipline follows, not as punishment, but as empowerment. He disciplines thought, word, and deed, knowing that every unexamined habit is a seed of future regret. He wakes early, reads, reflects, moves, and works with deliberate intention. In the rhythm of discipline, he discovers freedom, the paradox that self-imposed structure liberates him from the tyranny of impulse and external expectation. Action becomes his language. No longer paralyzed by doubt or indecision, he acts decisively, but not recklessly. He understands that clarity emerges not from waiting for certainty, but from engagement with the world. Each step taken, each risk embraced, is a conversation with reality, a testing ground for courage, resilience, and ingenuity. He moves, knowing that inaction is the silent accomplice of emptiness, and that true vitality emerges only when he shapes life rather than being shaped by it. Gratitude deepens his perspective. He sees the impermanence of all things, the fragility of human connection, the fleeting nature of triumph and tragedy alike. And in this awareness, he treasures the present moment, honors the people who enrich his life, and appreciates the subtle gifts that daily existence offers. the brush of wind on skin, the hush of a forest, the spark of insight, the comfort of silence. Gratitude becomes his compass, guiding him to the richness of life that had been invisible when he was lost in longing or distraction. Adaptability transforms him. He learns that rigidity is the breeding ground of suffering, that life, like water, finds a way around obstacles, and that true strength lies not in resisting change, but in flowing with it. He embraces uncertainty, welcomes challenge, and sees obstacles not as threats, but as catalysts for growth. In adaptability, he discovers that power is not in resisting the world, but in aligning with its currents while maintaining the sovereignty of his inner self. Resilience solidifies him. Life will test, betray, and humble him, but he understands that these are not signs of weakness. They are the fire that forges character. He cultivates the ability to recover, to learn, to rise stronger after every fall. Pain becomes a teacher, rejection a lens, and failure a stepping stone. He moves through life like a warrior tempered by trials, knowing that every scar is proof of survival, and every challenge an opportunity for ascension. Learning becomes a lifelong devotion. The modern man understands that knowledge is not mere accumulation of facts, but the evolution of perception, the sharpening of judgment, and the expansion of consciousness. He reads, observes, reflects, and experiments, constantly reshaping his mind to meet the demands of life with sophistication, depth, and clarity. Ignorance becomes intolerable, and the pursuit of wisdom is his unyielding quest. And in this relentless journey, he discovers a profound paradox. The emptiness that once haunted him is now the very source of his depth. Where once he feared the void, he now embraces it as space for creativity, introspection, and authentic connection. Where once he sought external validation, he now recognizes that the only approval that matters is his own earned through courage, integrity, and conscious action. The modern man, once empty, now understands that life's meaning is not bestowed, but constructed, not discovered in others, but forged within. And as he stands in this realization, fully embodied, fully present, he knows a power few will ever attain, the power to be complete in himself, to navigate the world with clarity and authority, to love without need, to act without fear, and to exist without apology. He has transcended the emptiness, not by avoiding it, not by filling it with noise, not by clinging to the approval of others, but by diving into its depths, confronting it with courage, integrating it with wisdom, and transforming it into a foundation of strength, presence, and freedom. And in this transformation, he realizes the ultimate truth. The modern man is never empty unless he allows himself to be. Emptiness is not a sentence. It is a summons, a call to awaken, to rise, and to reclaim the boundless power, depth, and vitality that resides in every human soul. He is awake, he is whole, he is unstoppable, he is alive. And in that awakening, he understands something elemental, timeless, and unshakable. The world may challenge him, tempt him, and attempt to diminish him, but nothing outside himself holds the power to define his worth or steal his vitality. The chaos of modern life, the manipulation of culture, the fleeting illusions of desire, they are all mere tests, mirrors reflecting only what he chooses to see. He sees clearly now. The emptiness he once feared was never a void to flee from, but a crucible in which his true self was forged. Every fear faced, every impulse mastered, every moment of solitude embraced, has transformed him into a man unbound by circumstance, untethered from approval, and unafraid of the shadows within or the storms without. In this clarity, he finds the courage to live without compromise, to speak without hesitation, to act without hesitation, and to love without need. He realizes that life does not demand perfection. It demands presence, integrity, and the relentless pursuit of authenticity. And in honoring this, he transcends the ordinary, touching the extraordinary, living fully in the rarefied air of a soul that has met itself and refused to settle for anything less than total alignment. He stands at the threshold of all possibility, knowing that the power to create, to conquer, to inspire, and to leave a legacy rests entirely within him. The world may sway, crumble, or shift, but his core is immovable. The emptiness that once haunted him is now the source of his depth, the wellspring of his strength, and the silent fire that fuels every thought, every action, every dream. And so he walks forward, not searching, not hoping, not fearing, because he knows that fulfillment is no longer a destination, but a state of being. He is complete, he is sovereign, he is free. This is the awakening of the modern man, a man who has stared into the void, embraced his own shadow, and emerged unbroken, radiant, and unstoppable. He is the master of himself. He is the architect of his life. He is the embodiment of a truth older than time, that power, purpose, and peace are found not in the world outside, but in the world within. He is awake, he is whole, he is unstoppable, and he will never be empty again.